So this is the idea that caught the attention of the CIA, this idea of deliberately inducing extreme regression.
Talk about the woman you visited in the nursing home who had gone through this.
Yeah, I start the book with a profile of a woman named Gail Kastner. Gail Kastner was one of Ewan Cameron's patients, and I read about her because she successfully sued the Canadian government, which was also funding Ewan Cameron. I read about her lawsuit that she had just won an important victory. She'd gotten a settlement because she had been used as a guinea pig in these experiments without her knowledge. So I called her, actually just got her number from the phone book, and she was very, very reticent to talk at first. She said she hated journalists, and it was very difficult for her to talk about it because she would relive all of these experiences. And I said, well, she said, what do you want to talk to me about? And I said, well, I just got back from Iraq, and this was 2004, and I feel like something that was done to you, the philosophy of what was done to you, has something to do with what I saw in Iraq, which was this desire to wipe clean a country and to start over from scratch. And I even think that some of what we're seeing at Guantanamo with this attempt to regress prisoners through sensory deprivation and remake them is also related to what happened to you. And there was this long pause, and she said, okay, come and see me. So I flew to Montreal, and we spent the day talking, and she shared her story with me. She talks about her electric dreams, which is, she doesn't have very many memories of what happened to her in this period because she underwent such extraordinary shock, and it did wipe out her memory. She regressed to the point where she sucked her thumb, urinated on the floor, didn't know who she was, and she didn't have any memory of this, any memory at all that she'd ever been hospitalized. She only realized it, I think, 20 years later when she read an article about a group of fellow patients who had successfully sued the CIA. And she picked out a few lines in the newspaper articles: regression, loss of language, and she thought, wait a minute, this sounds like me. This sounds like what I've heard about myself. And so she went and she asked her family, was I ever at the Allen Memorial Hospital? And at first they denied it, and then they admitted it. She requested her file, and she read that yes, she had been admitted by Dr. Ewan Cameron, and she saw all of these extraordinary treatments that had been done to her.
We're going to go to break, but when we come back, we're going to move from shocking the individual, shocking the body, to shocking the body politic, whether in Chile or in Iraq. We're talking to Naomi Klein. Her book is being released today. It's called The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. Stay with us.
Aprieto firme mi mano y hundo el arao en la tierra. Hace años que llevo en ella como nuestra gota. Aprieto firme mi mano y hundo el arao en la tierra. Hace años que llevo en ella como nuestra gota. Vuelan mariposas, cantan grillos, la piel se me pone negra y el sol brilla, brilla y brilla. El sudor me hace surcos, yo hago surcos a la tierra sin parar. Vuelan mariposas, cantan grillos, la piel se me pone negra.
The great musician Victor Jara. Victor Jara died in the days after September 11th in Chile, killed by the Pinochet forces. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. Our guest for the hour, Naomi Klein, author of The Shock Doctrine. It's coming out today, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. I want to move from the individual body being shocked to the body politic. You talked about Chile. Let's talk about Iraq, the privatization of war in Iraq. We have this breaking news out of Iraq today. The Iraqi government says it's pulling the license of the U.S. security company Blackwater over its involvement in a fatal shooting in Baghdad on Sunday. Interior Ministry spokesperson Abdul Karim Khalaf said 8 civilians were killed and 13 wounded when security contractors believed to be working for Blackwater USA opened fire in a predominantly Sunni neighborhood of western Baghdad. Khalaf said, quote, "We have canceled the license of Blackwater and prevented them from working all over Iraqi territory. We will also refer those involved to Iraqi judicial authorities." It was not immediately clear if the measure against Blackwater is intended to be temporary or permanent. Naomi, Klein, take it from there.
Well, that's an extraordinary piece of news. I mean, this is really the first time that one of these mercenary firms may actually be held accountable. As Jeremy Scahill's written in his incredible book, Blackwater, The Rise of the Most Powerful Mercenary Army, the real problem is there haven't been prosecutions. These companies work in this absolute gray zone, and they're either Boy Scouts and nothing's gone wrong, which completely doesn't mesh with what we know about the way they're behaving in Iraq and all of the sort of videos that we've seen online of just target practice on Iraqi civilians, or the lawlessness and the immunity in which they work has protected them. So, if the Iraqi government is actually going to kick Blackwater of Iraq, it could really be a turning point in terms of of pulling these companies into the law and questioning the whole premise of why this level of privatization and lawlessness has been allowed to take place. But I mentioned how Donald Rumsfeld was a student of Milton Friedman's in the 60s, actually. And the thing about Donald Rumsfeld is he really went beyond his mentor, because Milton Friedman, as I said earlier, he believed that the only acceptable role for government was policing, what was the military. That was the only thing he really thought the government should do. Everything else should be privatized. Donald Rumsfeld studied with Friedman, saw him as a mentor, celebrated his birthday every year with him. But he really took this one step further, because Rumsfeld believed that actually the work of policing and of war fighting could also be privatized and outsourced. And he made this very clear. This was really his mission of transformation, which I think is really not understood how radical it was. We hear this phrase, we hear Bush praising Rumsfeld for his radical vision of transformation of the military. And it's all these sort of buzzwords that are hard to understand. But if we look at what Rumsfeld's record was, it was that, I write in the book that really what he did is, this is somebody who after he left the Ford administration, spent a couple of decades working in business and really saw himself as a man of the new economy. And, this is somewhere where I think that the research I did for No Logo really intersects with this disaster capitalism stage that we're in right now. Because Rumsfeld took the 1990s revolution in branding, in corporate branding, and this is what I wrote about in No Logo, where you had all of these companies that used to produce products, announcing with great fanfare that they don't produce products anymore, they produce brands, they produce images, and they can let other people, sort of lesser contractors, do the dirty work of actually making stuff. And that was the sort of revolution in outsourcing, and that was the paradigm of the hollow corporation. Rumsfeld very much comes out of that tradition, and when he came on board as defense secretary, he wrote in like a new economy CEO that was going to do one of these radical restructurings. But what he was doing is he was taking this philosophy of this revolution in the corporate world and applying it to the military. And what he oversaw was the hollowing out of the American military, where essentially the role of the army is branding, is marketing, is projecting the image of strength and dominance on the globe, and then but outsourcing every function, from healthcare, providing healthcare to soldiers, to the building of military bases, which was already happening under the Clinton administration, to the extraordinary role that Blackwater has played, and companies like it, like DynCorp, where we've, as Jeremy has reported, they're actually engaged in combat.
And in fact,